and welcome to the daily reflection from Salisbury Cathedral for Monday, the 7th of June. I'm Canon Nigel Davies, the Vicar of the Close. I hope this picture is coming to you okay. The trouble is I decided to swap with Robert Titley and the schedule wasn't on my laptop, so I'm using my phone. And there's an annoying little thing that tells me to rotate the device. So perhaps I'll do that and then maybe the picture will look better. Anyway, here I am on the screen, hopefully with no annoying thing telling me to rotate the screen. So I'm going to think about, or I was thinking about, the G7 summit, which will be taking place in Cornwall this week. It seems that everybody is going to Cornwall, and so why not world leaders? It's a lovely part of the country. The only thing is, we hope it doesn't sink under the weight of the people who will be there. And as I was thinking about the G7 summit, my thoughts turned to the of leadership, because there will be 7 leaders at that meeting, each with a distinct personality, each with a different way of leading. They have a style, and we tend to know what that will be. They have different styles, and perhaps they play to their own country, perhaps they play to the world stage. They want to be seen as to be effective and perhaps powerful and decisive leaders. Interestingly enough, when I turned up on Google the names of these 7 leaders, it looked very much like a film star set. They had each had a picture, each has the flag above them, and so it does rather look like a film star, or even like those who are in a blockbuster movie. So I wonder how they'll play out. Well, I imagine Emmanuel Macron will have that Gallic flair. The Italian Prime Minister, Mario Draghi, is a rather unknown quantity to me. And so I don't know quite how he will come across. Then, of course, there's Angela Merkel, who is the safe pair of hands, the very serious politician, the one who is measured in her pronouncements. Joe Biden, the American president, a new face on the block, a very different face and a different approach from his predecessor, much more considered and much more, perhaps for many, engaging. Then we have the Prime Minister of Japan, Yoshida Suga, again, somebody I'm not sure of how he will come across. And finally, there's Justin Trudeau with, I suppose, film star looks. Perhaps he's the youngest of all of them, maybe perhaps slightly younger than Macron. And finally, of course, we have our own Boris Johnson, who I'm sure we can rely on to make some amazing pronouncements, to give everybody wonderful sound bites, to be full of positivity, to be full of all that we've come to expect from him. And I thought about why these people are leaders. Obviously, they were elected as leaders, but I wondered what the motivation they had for becoming leaders. Were they folk that we felt they could be trusted? Do their countries trust them? Or are they more like celebrities? Do they have to have a certain amount of charisma? Are they those who wanted the office because they wanted to wield power and they wanted to know how being powerful felt? And the exercise of power is one thing, but are there those who want to exercise power in a way to make their countries better, to make the world better? Are they those who have a vision, who want to share that vision? Are they the people who we would trust to deliver on what their promises are? There are all manner of different reasons why people go into politics, why people end up leading their countries, why people lead their parties. It does seem more and more, though, that leading a party, you have to be a very charismatic person. And one of the reasons why the Labour Party fared so poorly in the recent local elections was because people thought, or it was said in the media, that nobody really knew what Keir Starmer stood for, whereas with Boris, it's hard not to know what he stands for. At least, well, we know what he says he stands for. So there are different ways of being leaders, different ways of approaching leadership. And as I thought about this, I was reminded of a story which I'm going to read you now. It's a story about somebody leading by example. Interestingly enough, the earlier part of the story, the people in it are those who you would expect to lead, but who, when it comes to the crucial moment, choose not to. The story is from this book. It's a book of gathered stories by Margaret Silf called Wisdom Stories. And this particular little story is entitled She Who Sits Alone. A terrible time once befell the Comanche people. It was a time of drought. The land was dying, and the people were dying too. In their despair, they called upon the giant spirit. Great Spirit, they implored, our land is dying and our people are dying. How have we angered you? Bring an end to this drought and save your people, for soon there will be nothing left alive. And so they prayed and they danced, they waited and they prayed, but no rain came. And the little ones and the old ones suffered, and no one knew how to end the suffering. But there was one small girl who had not yet died of hunger. Her name was She Who Sits Alone. Sitting alone, she watched her people pray and dance, and she held her beloved doll in her arms. The doll was her intimate companion, her second self, dressed in its warrior clothing, with a bone belt and beaded leggings, and bearing the feathers of the blue jay on its head. She Who Sits Alone watched with her doll as the elders went up to the top of the mountain to receive the wisdom of the Great Spirit. Several times did the sun rise above the mountain, and several times did the light fade behind the mountain's bulk before they returned. On the mountain top, the people gathered round to hear the message of the Great Spirit, and this is what the Great Spirit said to them. For many generations, the people have taken from the earth whatever they needed and wanted, but they have given nothing back to the earth. Now the earth is in distress, and the people must make a sacrifice. They must bring to the fire of sacrifice their most treasured possessions. The ashes of the sacrifice must be scattered to the four winds. When this has been done, the rains will come, and the earth will live again. The people gave thanks and then returned to their teepees to search out their most treasured possessions. Surely the Great Spirit does not want my bow, said the archer. Nor could the Great Spirit possibly desire my treasured blanket, said the mother. I know that the Great Spirit could not be asking for my herbs, said the medicine man. And so it continued. Everyone had a reason not to give the Great Spirit their greatest treasure. Meanwhile, She Who Sits Alone took her warrior doll into her arms, held it tight and whispered, It is you the Great Spirit desires. I know what I must do. So that night, when everyone slept, She Who Sits Alone threw off her sleeping blanket and climbed to the top of the mountain, carrying her warrior doll in one hand and a lighted stick from the campfire in the other. When she reached the mountain top, she spoke to the Great Spirit. Great Spirit, she said, here is my warrior doll, the gift of my mother and my father before they died, and my most treasured possession. Please accept it. As she kindled the fire, she wept, and she remembered her parents and grandparents and friends who had died of hunger, and she thrust her doll into the flames. Soon the fire died down. She gathered the cooling ashes and cast them to the four winds. Exhausted, she lay down on the mountain top and fell asleep. When the rising sun kissed her awake the next morning, she looked around dazed. There, where she had offered her sacrifice, lay a shining feather of the blue jay. And as she knelt to look more closely, the first drops of rain caressed her face. From then on, she who sits alone was given a new name by her grateful people. She became known as one who loved her people. I wonder perhaps which of the leaders of the G7 will appear to be the one who loves their people, and which, I suppose, when in discussion about how the world is and what needs to be done, which one will be brave enough, big enough to offer up something as a compromise, or will nothing come from the G7? We'll have to wait and see. Thank you for watching, and hopefully it wasn't too disorientating early on. Bye-bye.